everyone. My name is Deneen White. I'm the host of the Coffee in the Greenroom Podcast, the place where we have the conversations that you have in the green room, but not necessarily on stage. Today, I am so excited to have Roberto Bugatto on the podcast. He is a leadership strategist, mentor, and the creator of The Nuclear Leader, a transformational system that helps business leaders bring structure, clarity, and control to their organizations, especially in times of uncertainty. And God knows we are in that time right now. Through his mentorship program, Roberto works hands-on with CEOs and founders to replace chaos and improvisation with emotional intelligence, operational systems, and high-performance teams. His mission, to help leaders stop surviving and start leading with stability and purpose. Roberto, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Deneen. It's fantastic.
You're welcome. So it sounds like you have such an amazing background to be a leader, the strategist. So can you tell me a little bit about how you started doing what you do?
Well, I come from very humble background, and I know it sounds cheesy and kind of trendy to say that. Like every new influencer, the motivator has actually said, I come. But then, to be fair, I come from very humble beginnings. So I started from operations all the way up. So this is what allowed me to understand the ins and outs, the cogs and the mechanisms of businesses in different industries from the ground up. And then for the past 10 to 12 years, I've spent my time as a leader in mid-sized companies, small-sized companies, Fortune 500 companies, and consulting and otherwise. So the point is, I'm a big observer. So along the way, I've kind of dragged along and grabbed some of that learning from the ground up. And because we tend to kind of separate the leadership from the operational team. And I've come from both places, and I understand on both sides what the needs are and how to converge them together into stability, as you read.
I love that so much because and I feel like I've lived like 9 lives, almost like a cat. But in one of my first lives, I worked in a bank, right? And I started out as an assistant, like a part-time teller, and I worked my way up to assistant vice president of the bank, branch manager. And I feel like I was a better manager or leader because I'd been counting the money, I had done the customer service and all of that. So, and something that in your profile that it talks about is emotional intelligence. A lot of times I feel like leaders lack that because like if they're coming in and they haven't climbed the ranks, if you will, a lot of times they're like, yeah, this is the way we do it. And they don't take the time to listen to the people underneath them. So can you talk a little bit about that and why that's so important?
Oh, fantastic question. And it is absolutely essential. At the end of the day, the way that we can bring together those two sides of the business, the operations and strategy, is that if both sides speak the same language, and the one common universal language that we all have is emotions. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, in The Nuclear Leader, is precisely in the model what I'm trying to teach people about, what I'm trying to guide or mentor leaders about, is that if you want to maximize, if you want to extract the maximum value out of your human resources, out of your resources, in this case, the people, you've got to do it from the connection standpoint. You have to do it from the emotional standpoint. You cannot, like you said, it's easier when you come like you and I, when you come from the ground up, then you know what people on the ground up are feeling as they escalate but if you're a career leader, which is perfectly fine, I'm not advocating against it, but you got to add into your roster of qualities and learning emotional intelligence, because that would allow you to, without having experienced exactly the grown-up career, but you can actually connect and bring that maximum value out of those people that are operational rather than strategy.
I love that. So let's talk about bringing maximum value out of your human resources, because a lot of times people might think you want to bring maximum value, but the way I perceive this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're bringing maximum value by building relationships with people and getting to know what their strengths are and having them work out of their strengths. Can you expand a little bit on that?
I think there's a very simple example in our own personal lives. Do you have any children, Deneen, or someone that you love very, very dearly that you will do a lot for them?
Of course. Yes, I have two nephews and a niece that I would like lay down my life for in 2 seconds flat.
Do they have to work for you to do that?
No, not at all.
No, they don't have to pay you. So this is the point. When you're already by other means, like in this case, a family relationship, when you're connected already to that person, there is not much resistance to working, going beyond and above what you've intended in the first place in the relationship, because you're connected to it. You feel like it's part of your responsibility. This is exactly what the model teaches. This is what I'm trying to bring into the operational and strategy is, hey, if you're able to connect to your team, you don't have to tell them. They will do it for you. So that's where the connection comes.
What if you're someone who's not really good at connecting? Is emotional intelligence something that they can learn through reading The Nuclear Leader? Or how can people learn emotional intelligence? Because I know a lot of people that lack that.
Yeah, well, because they don't teach us that in school. The system teaches us to be just factory workers, and that's what we are. 9 to 5. Come in, come out. Pay your mortgage, and then move on. The next, but this is what we gotta bring new. And I think there's a bigger movement now in different industries where people are understanding that emotional intelligence is part of the essential soft. I don't like the term, but they call it the soft skills versus the hard skills. And if they bring it, it's just like any ability. You have to first learn it and then practice. It's like a muscle. You gotta work at it. But it needs to become important. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I wish they would teach emotional intelligence in school. I know they keep telling me that I'm going to use calculus. I'm still waiting for that moment where I'm like using sine and tan and tangent and all of that stuff. But emotional intelligence is something that we could all definitely use on a daily basis.
Yes, indeed. It seems much more a priority in our roster of academic curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah. Math people, don't come at me for that. If you have a use, please let me know. Drop it in the comments. I'll happily retract that statement. But on a more serious note, so tell me about The Nuclear Leader. This is a book that you wrote, and it's laying out your system. So can you give us a little glimpse into that work?
Yes, definitely. I think the best way to explain it is how did it came about? Why The Nuclear Leader, and how it kind of took form in my brain. And it came about from the least expected sources, because obviously I have been working for a long time on how to systemize things. I'm passionate about continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, which is all about processes and standardization. So I'm obsessed with that, and my brain works that way. But as I was working at it, I thought, how can I combine the hard skills and the soft skills to make it an applicable, practical, pragmatic model. And reading a very non-industry, non-work book, it was actually a religious book called The Temple and Cosmos. There was this concept from the author that was quoting a nuclear physicist, P.T. Matthews, a British physicist. And then in the concept of the book, that Matthew, he's got a book called the Nuclear Apple, and he's just talking about physics. It kind of confuses the title, but one of the points he's trying to make is that there is this misconception about faith and science being disconnected, right? And he being a physicist himself said, the first one that apply faith is scientists, because we cannot see something, but we take it for granted, or we actually affirm that exists. And then he says that he talks about going, you talk about not using calculus. Maybe we got to use a little bit of calculus now in the concept, but he says that the probability of the existence of life as it is, it's equal to us taking a deck of cards, a poker deck of cards, throw it in the air, and then they come together in the perfect order, which is such a ridiculous, huge number statistically that it's equivalent to more atoms in the known universe. So the probability of that happening is just absolutely or mathematically improbable. And what he poses in his theory of the nuclear apple is that there has to be a shuffling agent that puts the cards in order. Okay. And then that clicked in my head. It's like, wow, it's a fantastic concept, because how do we keep chaos from happening? Because that's what physics and the natural orders, if you set something up, you let it be, it's going to turn into chaos by itself. So what's the concept, or what's the role that leaders play? We're the shuffling agents. So this is where the nuclear leader model comes in. Leaders need to become the stabilizers, like the calibrators of chaos avoidance, so to speak.
Wow, I love that so much. There's so much to unpack in that, but I love that essentially leaders are the deck shufflers. They're the ones that make sure that everything comes together. So so many things I could like. It sounds like this book should be required reading in every MBA program, because a lot of people want to go into business and they're not seeing things like this. So where can people find, if people want to read The Nuclear Leader, is it available on Amazon? How can they get a hold of this?
Yes, Amazon is the place. I think I'm a modern author. I didn't want to go through the hassle of traditional publishing, but I'm I have a few episodes on my past podcast where I talk about it. A lot of blogs. I'm running now a bi-weekly newsletter where I take some of the concepts of the book, and then I do it on LinkedIn. It's a twice a month newsletter. But if they want the book, there's a first and second edition on Amazon that they can find under the Nuclear Leader R Bugatto.
Okay, and how would they find your newsletter? Because this sounds amazing as well.
Yeah, if they find me on LinkedIn and under the same name, R Bugatto with a double T, they will find there is a newsletter called Unapologetical. It's a play on words. So every twice a month, I give my 2 cents about what's going on.
I love that. Okay. So now that's your first assignment, listeners. Make sure you go check out that newsletter on LinkedIn, and make sure you go get the book, especially if you're in leadership, because this should be essential reading to everyone who is a leader in any capacity. Now, let's talk about how we met. So the way that you and I met was because you were one of the first co-authors with Brian Tracy. How cool is that? So talk to me about that experience.
Actually, what I've been told that I'm probably the first native Spanish speaker to co-author with Brian Tracy, which is a batch in itself. I mean, it's fantastic. So it actually is one of those things that just happens, and then you have to seize the opportunity. But I was contacted by Brian Tracy Publishing. They said, we're looking for authors that have a good idea. I presented to them the nuclear leader concept, and it was already published. So they said, yeah, we want to hear more, past the interviews. I invested with them, and I even had the chance to have a one-to-one interview with a great legend, Brian Tracy.
Oh my God. Okay. So Brian Tracy, if anyone's listening and you don't know who he is, go Google him. But he is one of the foremost leaders on sales, on leadership, on marketing. He's an icon, author of Eat That Frog, which is one of the things that I use every morning. I'm like, I have to eat that frog. So what was it like sitting down talking to an icon in leadership about your book on leadership?
I mean, it's one of those moments where you're trying to absorb everything that is ongoing, and you can't, because he's got like 50 years of like hands-on, top of the world experience, and yeah, we prepared some questions for him that he answered fantastically. Some of that was spontaneous during the interview, and it was just I was starstruck, I guess, and he's fantastic, because anything you ask him, he skips into an experience, anecdote, or his just wealth of knowledge, and then he gives you an answer.
Yeah, he is a master storyteller. That's one thing that I love about. Well, there are a lot of things I love about Brian Tracy, but the fact that he is a master storyteller, and he can back everything up with a story. I think that would be a great skill for leaders to learn as well, as when you're learning emotional intelligence, because a lot of times the reason that religious texts have stood the test of time is because when, like, if you're reading the Bible, Jesus isn't talking in A plus B equals C, he's speaking in story. He's telling you stories to get points across. And I love the way Brian Tracy does that. And like you said, anytime you ask him a question, he's like, well, there was this one time. And like he can go off, and it's just amazing to have the opportunity to be in a room with someone like him, let alone co-authoring a book with him.
Yes, indeed. It was a very, very good opportunity for me.
Awesome. All right. So, Roberto, if people want to find you, if people want to learn more about Nuclear Leader, they want to learn more about the book that you co-authored with Brian Tracy, where can they find you?
They can either go on LinkedIn, which I use every single day, or I'm also on Instagram, although I'm renewing the profile, so I had to delete a few things. But Facebook, but basically my website, www.rrbugatto.com, and then they can find anything there.
Awesome. Well, Roberto, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I am so excited to get a hold of your book and for my listeners to read more about your book, get your newsletter, and just learn more from you. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I had a great time. I hope that you enjoyed as well. Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Deneen. It was fantastic. Really, really. You're welcome. All right. So if you enjoyed this episode of Coffee in the Green Room, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make sure you hit subscribe. You can find us on Apple, iTunes. You can find us on every streaming platform, and make sure that you follow along, because you never know who's going to be here next in Coffee in the Green Room. Thank you so much for listening, and have an amazing day.